Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with the last Texas Hill Country Fishing Report of the year with Greg Welander of Upstream on the Fly. How you doing, Greg?
Well, hi, Marvin. I'm doing great. However, it's cold here in Texas. Today it's stayed in the 40s out here in the Hill Country all day. The sun was out, which kind of fools you because, from the inside looking out, it looks like it's a nice day outside. But we do have some 60-degree days coming up, though, in the 7-day outlook. So that's exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I know last time we talked, you were really concerned, your highs were okay for the fishing to stay good, but you were really worried that you were going to have a really long streak of lows that were going to start shutting the fishing down. What are you seeing?
Well, yeah, the water temperatures have definitely fallen off. Back when we were talking last, just for example, Lake Travis, it was in the upper 70s, lake water temperature, and now it's in the low 60s. And that's a big body of water. It takes a longer time for that amount of water to change temperature-wise. But the rivers have definitely cooled off because we've had so many, we've had a lot of coolness. I think over the last 2 weeks, I've only seen around 3 days consecutively where we're pushing the upper 60s, maybe touching 70, just depends on what portion of the area you're in. So that does start to affect the metabolism of the fish. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. This time of year, I call this the transition period. My waders, first off, the waters have cooled down, substantially over the last couple of weeks, and my waders have come out of the closet. Wet wading is a stop for the time being. There's no wet wading being done by me, at least. But since your last report, we've only had a few nice warm up days, and the fish were interested on those days. But it's important to note. I want to mention to our listeners, I prefer fishing in the afternoon hours during this winter time versus the morning hours because you've got a better opportunity for the bass and the sunfish with the waters warming in the day. So let's talk about what I mean by transition period. Okay, so basically I'm transitioning into Texas winter. Okay, our weather, it can vary from year to year. Okay, we can have snow, we can have 90-degree days. It's just, you just never know. But so far this year, we're kind of running what I would call what a typical December should be like. And it's been, cool evenings and not that warm in the afternoons. So this includes, when I fish, how I fish, and the species that I fish for. So when I fish, you have to be flexible this time of year, in regards to chasing warm water species, as bass, sunfish, what have you. But I pay attention to the weather a lot, which I do all the time, but I really pay attention to it more so in the winter. So I want to know when is the next cold front, okay? When does the wind switch back out of the south? Okay, I like to see days, daytime highs, at least in the upper 60s, okay, at a minimum, with a south wind. And, having 2 or 3 day run of that, is a good thing. And then I'll generally look at getting out on the water on that second or third day of the warming prior to or following a cold front. And I prefer the afternoons over the mornings as well. And that's just because the temperature's warming up. And the surface temperature of the water is going to be warming up. And the fish will, definitely come up into the shallows a little more so. But how I fish, okay? Like I said on my last report, you've got to slow down your presentations for your warm water species. And if you're fishing deeper water, I'll pull out sinking fly lines of various sink rates, okay? And that's if I'm not getting eats on a floating line. And then the species that I fish for, okay? So there's 3 things: when I fish, how I fish, and the species that I fish for. So there's cold water species here in Texas, such as rainbow trout. We have several options for trout fishing here in Central Texas. One, of course, is the famous Lower Guadalupe River out of Canyon Dam. But if you want, more solitude and you don't care about the size of the fish so much, then there's numerous spots throughout our entire state of Texas. But, I'm going to kind of focus on Central Texas and the Hill Country, in regards to the rainbow trout. So over on the Blanco River or the Llano River, Texas Park and Wildlife does a great job at providing, numerous locations for folks to chase rainbows during the winter months. Some of your listeners out there, if you guys want to, Google trout stocking in Texas Park and Wildlife will have a nice itemized breakout on everything from urban ponds out to, to the streams like the Blanco or the Llano here in Central Texas, on when they're released and how many is actually being released on those locations and on those days, in both December and January. But another fish that I start looking at a little heavy, is the striped bass. So I enjoy chasing stripers. And this time of the year is the stripers like the nasty, cloudy, cool weather. It's more so the angler that might not care for it as much, but the striped bass are actually kind of turned on by that weather change. Well, let's talk a little bit about more of that here in a second. But I get a lot of requests this time of year about teaching folks how to fly fish. And generally it's, somebody's significant other is purchasing a gift certificate for fly fishing as a Christmas present. And I do offer gift certificates for anybody out there that, has an interest in that. But, first off, I normally start off with a casting lesson. And that's if somebody has like zero, skills or not skills, but they don't have any background in fishing. They've never actually gone fly fishing. And I'll offer a casting lesson for somebody, and we'll do it, generally on a day prior to actually fishing. But there have been times that I actually do a lesson before we get out on the water. And I'll generally take a client out to a less crowded area, like the Blanco or even the Llano River is my favorite. And, when you take a beginner out on the Llano River, it's just pure enjoyment for both the beginner and even myself. They might not be catching a trophy trout, but they're catching fish, and it's a gorgeous part of the state. So let's jump back to the warm water. Okay, there's several power plant lakes throughout Central Texas. One of them is Bastrop. It's a power plant located just 30 miles east of Austin, and Lake Bastrop serves as a power plant cooling pond. Okay, for I think it's called the Sim Giddon Power Plant, which is operated by the Lower Colorado River Authority. And the power plant is operated off natural gas, and the water in the lake is actually being used to cool its generators. And the bass fishing through the winter months is fantastic. And of course, we were talking about stripers, okay? We've got stripers on a lot of the lakes around the area, Lake Buchanan, Lake Travis, and even as far south down as Canyon Lake, which is the reservoir just above New Braunfels. And that's actually where the Guadalupe River comes out of Canyon. And a lot of the stripers get out of Canyon and they're in the Guadalupe River below the dam there. And they're eating on the trout, typically the state stockers that are being put in right there at the tail race. But, your tips and techniques. Okay. Let's talk about Bastrop, Buchanan, and the Llano River. Okay. As far as winter fisheries, so Bastrop currently, the bass are along the hydrilla lines, and on the outer edges of the grass, and they're chasing shad. So the cool thing that I like about Lake Bastrop is all the submerged grass. And, you've probably got, 2 or 3 feet of water over this grass, but you've got a visual line that you can actually present your fly to. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy that. And, the fish are keying into shad. So any of your shad bait fish patterns, that I talk about all the time, your deceivers, your big clousers, your bushwhackers, your game changers, lunch monies. I mean, anything that is shad looking has been producing up on Bass Drop. And, back again, it's the color white, chartreuse over white or gray over white, and using a 7 or 8 weight fly rod. And the hook sizes in those flies are kind of 1/0 down to size 2. And Bass Drop, you can get away with a floating line for the most part, but I'll generally have an intermediate sink line on the boat as well. But over on Lake Buchanan, for stripers, there's 2 things you want to do. One is you're looking for birds. So bringing a pair of binoculars with you out, for folks that are doing it themselves, bringing binoculars with you out on the boat. And, of course, your electronics, the graph, your fish finder, to be able to locate your shad and your stripers, because the shad is the key forage out on Buchanan or Travis or even Lake Canyon. Okay, so I try to keep it pretty simple. It's basically clouser minnows or scissor tail clousers, which is another one of my favorites. And all the fishing is done with full sinking lines, and I'm using short leaders. Generally they're about 3 feet in length, and I prefer fluorocarbon. And your flies, gray over white, chartreuse over white, and then on those days that it's extremely overcast, real dark, almost low light, black over purple. If you're not getting bit with some of the lighter colors, black over purple is a good fly to pull out, and it's a clouser. Okay, and 7 and 8 weight fly rods are a must because of throwing those sinking lines. And of course, you can even use a 9 weight for that if you've got one. And the last fishery, the Welander River. Okay, and let's talk more about the state stockers that Texas Park and Wildlife puts in there this time of the year. So initially, after the trout have been stocked in the Welander or the Blanco or any of the other streams out in the areas that you live, typically within the first couple of weeks, you can catch them on anything that moves. Okay, and you could just put on a small size 10 or size 12 woolly bugger or anything that resembles a small river minnow, just even a little micro clouser. But then once they start to get acclimated, they'll start keying in on mayflies, and they'll be eating you can nymph them and use small midges. But one of the favorite things I like to do is you can start watching the water. When you get out to the Welander, sit and watch for a while. And it's the craziest thing I've ever seen, but I've had numerous dry fly days out on the Welander River. And we're talking very small flies. I mean, we're talking size 20 and 22s. And they get pretty selective, like a dark brown or a black. Didn't matter what kind of pattern it was, just as long as it was in a certain size and a certain color. And, if you got a fiberglass rod or 1 weight, bring that along because those smaller fish are a lot of fun. But if you got a 5 weight, that'll work just fine. But Marvin, there we have it, the month of December as we get closer to Christmas here in the Texas Hill Country.
Well, that's awesome. And, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us. You can send them to us on our Instagram or our Facebook page. If we read your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag, and you'll get into a drawing for some cool stuff that Greg's going to pull together here, actually, because we're going to draw in early 2021, and there'll be a drawing. Greg, before I let you hop, why don't you let folks know where they can find you so until things get too cold or if people decide they want to chase some trout with you, they can reach out and maybe get a gift certificate or book you.
Okay. I've got a website. That's upstreamonthefly.com. And I'm over on social media, both on Instagram and Facebook as Upstream on the Fly.
Well, folks, as I mentioned at the beginning of the fishing report, we won't be together again until we're on the other side of 2020. So I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, Greg.
Well, Merry Christmas to you, Marvin.